Thinking in Bets by Annie Duke. Several doubts popped into my head as I considered reading Thinking in Bets by Annie Duke, as it showed up on my recommended reading list on Amazon. I don't play poker, I don't gamble, I've never been to a horse racing track, and I don't really watch sports. Why should I read this book that seems like it's about betting? I mean, that's even in the title. And even if I am interested in value investing, I don't think of that as betting, and I didn't like the word betting. Sometime later, I listened to a podcast featuring the author Annie Duke, where she eloquently recounted her experiences as a professional poker player. She suggested that similar to poker, decisions we make in life are often based on luck, and our decisions are linked to how our brains are neurologically wired. She promises that cultivating the skill of thinking in bets will improve decision making, that we will be able to distinguish outcome quality from decision quality. I picked up the book shortly following that, listening to that podcast. After all, I wrote my doctoral dissertation on how and why venture capitalists decide to invest in certain management teams over others. Thinking in Bets is about making decisions under conditions of uncertainty, luck, and learning to process the results of our decisions. Although this is not a book about poker or gambling, Duke offers her readers wisdom she collected from 20 years of playing professional poker and becoming a champion who won millions of dollars. This video analysis and review is a compilation of my takeaways, but it's not a substitute for reading the book. I will also admit I skimmed through several parts of the book that delved into more detail than I wanted. There are lots of stories and anecdotes and examples in the book, and I just wanted the takeaways that I could add to my toolbox. And spoiler alert, I'm much more comfortable with the word betting now. Winning and losing are only loose signals of decision quality. Annie Duke. What is a bet? A bet is a choice made by thinking what will probably happen. A bet is making a decision about an uncertain future. We make decisions or bets all the time. We bet on investing in a stock, to hire someone, to eat that donut versus eating something low carb, to buy a house, to buy a car, to post a tweet, to choose a restaurant, and so forth. Treating decisions as bets or in likelihoods of occurrence helps one to avoid decision traps. Each outcome is merely a possibility. Duke suggests that becoming more comfortable with uncertainty can help us see the world more accurately. Decision quality versus decision outcome. We have a tendency to confuse decisions with their outcomes. Poker players call this resulting. It is when you change your strategy after a few bets that didn't go as planned. In other words, you change course prematurely. While poor decisions may lead to a good outcome, the opposite is also true. Good decisions can also lead to poor outcomes sometimes. And sometimes we get lucky with a bad decision. And sometimes our outcomes are optimal because we made a good decision. The author illustrated a story where a CEO laments over firing one of his presidents because the subsequent two hires didn't work out. The CEO's decision to fire his president was because of performance issues, and even after he took the time to provide executive coaching in an effort to fill in the skills gaps. The performance issues unfortunately persisted, and the CEO fired his president. This is an example of resulting in hindsight bias. Hindsight bias is believing that you knew what the outcome would be after you learned the outcome, such as saying, "I knew that would happen." So the CEO treated the result as if it were an inevitable result rather than a probabilistic one. A priori beliefs. We make decisions based on our beliefs. We accumulate all this data and experience and then apply it to the situation at hand. Life skills are about becoming better at using data and our experiences to objectively make decisions. But unfortunately, sometimes our beliefs can be very wrong. Here is how we think we form abstract beliefs. We hear something, we think about it and vet it, and then we form our beliefs. Here is how we actually form abstract beliefs. We hear something, we believe it to be true, we think about it, and vet it, but only if we have time. Harvard psychology professor Daniel Gilbert reported people tend to find it very easy to believe and very difficult to doubt. Our default is to believe that what we hear and read are true. Does this mean we're naturally gullible? Perhaps. We've evolved to be efficient rather than accurate. For example, I doubt our ancestors would have stopped to contemplate whether a saber-toothed tiger was actually chasing them or not. They would have just ran. We are all learning, modifying, or destroying ideas all the time. Rapid destruction of your ideas when the time is right is one of the most valuable qualities you can acquire. You must force yourself to consider arguments on the other side. Charlie Munger. In reality, instead of altering our beliefs to fit new information, we tend to alter our interpretation of phenomena to fit our beliefs. Beliefs are difficult to change for most people. We can work to find information that confirms our beliefs, and we can actively work to discredit a conflicting belief. And the term for this is called motivated reasoning. The way we process new information is driven by our beliefs. When we have new information that might conflict with our beliefs, effectively making us wrong about something, we can either accept the information or ignore or discredit it. And it's very easy for us to ignore or discredit information that challenges our dearly held beliefs. Evidently, the smarter you are, the easier it is for bias to cloud your decisions. We think we're so smart that we couldn't possibly have biases. That is for everybody else. Duke lists out how we can vet a belief. We should ask, how do I know this? Where did I get this information from? Who did I get it from? Do I trust them? What do they know that I don't? Are they experts? And what is the quality of my source, and is it up to date? What are the other plausible alternatives? What am I missing? What I believe she is listing out for us is a plea to think more critically and scientifically. Reconnaissance. Mapping the future. How do our decisions predict our future? In the military, they use a term called reconnaissance to predict all the different ways their strategies could play out. It is a form of scenario planning to help military personnel better prepare and reduce shock or high emotions to outcomes. So we have a belief, a bet, and then a set of outcomes, which can be outcome A, B, C, or D. So any particular outcome can occur for many different reasons. So we're never 100% sure that the outcome occurred because of the bet that you made. When we think about all of the outcomes based on a bet, it helps us to think in terms of alternatives and to check our blind spots. This is how learning and experience works. A learning loop can look like this. We have a belief, we make some bet about it, then we see the outcome, and then we make another bet, and we see the outcome of that, which forms our belief, and hence the learning loop. So the more outcomes we see based on a type of bet, the more bets we tend to make, and this confirms our beliefs. And as we get more experience, we can get better at guessing the likelihood of an outcome. It really seems like a big game of trial and error, if you ask me. So most outcomes result from a mix of skill, luck, and missing information. We also do not know how much of each is involved in the final outcome, but when an outcome is right, we're subject to self-serving bias. We tend to take credit for good outcomes and blame the bad outcomes on something else or bad luck. This helps us maintain our self-image. So when it comes to someone or someone else's outcomes, we think that they got lucky. And people who engage in self-serving bias unfortunately miss learning opportunities, and they also tend to indulge in Schadenfreude. Schadenfreude is a German word, and it's when someone derives pleasure from another person's misery or misfortune. But not everything in life has to be a zero-sum game, such as in poker, meaning someone else doesn't have to lose in order for me to win. So I think that we need to give others credit for successes and admit that when we're wrong or when we could have done better. Self-critique can spur improvement and bring us learning opportunities which tend to compound over time. Bayesian analysis. The author did not specifically refer to Bayesian analysis in her book. For some reason, I fully expected her to explain the Bayesian view of probability in a book that was about bets and decision making. I'm not entirely certain why she didn't discuss it explicitly or include it as a chapter. And maybe the publisher wanted the book to be so mainstream and for the layman and thought Bayesian analysis might be a bit too complicated. But I think that if we're going to talk about bets, we really do have to talk about Bayesian analysis. So I'm going to talk about it here. The outcomes for our decisions all have some degree of probability attached to them. There is X% chance that we will be struck by lightning, a chance of winning the lottery, a chance that our favorite stock will increase in price within the next 6 months, and so forth. Probability helps us assign a meaningful numerical value to the likelihood that an event will occur when we admit that we do not and cannot know what will happen. It humbles us in a way. We tend to be uncertain about some of our decisions because we know that some of the inputs that go into our decision-making processes are unreliable. But we do know of a variety of techniques intended to help us make good decisions in the face of uncertainty. So for example, decision trees allow us to analyze events that unfold sequentially through time and to evaluate future scenarios, which often involve uncertainty. Bayesian analysis allows us to update our probabilities of upcoming events in the light of the most recent information. The author vaguely touched on this through the learning loop, but she didn't connect it to a Bayesian analysis. Other techniques include a Markov analysis, which is, you could think of it as a cousin to a decision tree, and which allows us to model the evolution of a chance process over time. And something else, another tool we have is a Monte Carlo simulation, which allows us to create a realistic model of an environment and then use a computer to create thousands of possible futures for it, which gives us insights on how we can expect things to unfold. But I don't think people are going to be doing Monte Carlo analysis for their everyday decisions. I will show you a simple way to understand Bayesian analysis. Suppose we have 3 cards. 2 red cards and an ace of spades that are all dealt face down. And if you choose the card on the left, what are the chances that you have an ace of spades? That's fairly easy. You have a 1 in 3 chance of an ace of spades. This is essentially the prior probability distribution. Now suppose the dealer turns over the card on the right and it ends up being the ace of spades. So now the probability of your card on the left is reduced from 1/3 to 0. But however, suppose the dealer turned over the card to reveal a red card. Now your probability of having an ace of spades has increased from 1/3 to 1/2. This is really, in essence, Bayesian probability thinking. We have a prior probability distribution that we update with new information to form a posterior probability. And I think it's a way of working with the world as things evolve. Bayes' theorem tells you how to compute the new probabilities. This formula here tells us how often A happens given that B happens, and it's written as PAB. When we know how often B happens, given that A happens, it's written as PBA. And when we know how likely A is on its own, it's written as PA, and when we know how likely B is on its own, it's written as PB. So let's suppose the probability of fire, or P fire, means how often there is a fire, and the probability of smoke, or P smoke, means how often we see smoke. Then the probability of fire and smoke means how often there is fire when we can see smoke, and the probability of fire means how often we can see smoke when there is fire. Let's do an example. What is the probability of a dangerous fire when we see smoke? And we know that the probability of a dangerous fire is 1%. The probability of smoke is fairly common, which is around 10% due to barbecues, and the probability of dangerous fires that produce smoke is 90%. So then all we really need to do is plug these values into that equation, which is 1% times 90%, all divided by 10%, to give us 9%. So the probability of a dangerous fire when there is smoke is 9%. Final thoughts. I doubt the messages in this book can help much unless you put it into practice. Thinking in bets or probabilities is likely going to be difficult for someone who's never done it before. But I really do think it can make you a better decision maker and a better thinker. Many of the messages in this book could have been condensed into fewer words. Duke cites the works of other notable authors such as Daniel Kahneman, Charles Duhigg, and Dan Gilbert that does make for some interesting sections. For some reason, I can't quite put my finger on it, but something about this book tested my patience. But in summary, I suppose the colloquial term, put your money where your mouth is, can provide a better picture about our confidence in our decisions. Do you think you're right? Would you bet $50? Would you bet $10,000? Thinking in these terms might help us be a little bit more objective, careful, critical, and truth-seeking with our decisions. And finally, let's just accept that there will always be a degree of uncertainty and randomness in the world that puts some of the outcomes out of our control, even if just for a little bit. If you liked this video and learned something, please click the like button, share this video, leave a comment, subscribe to my channel, and click the bell icon if you'd like to be notified of new video uploads. I tend to upload at least once per week, and I do have a really great lineup coming up for the rest of the year. So remember, leaders are readers, and you are a leader.